Director, Charlotte Lindell, and she's going to just share a little bit on on an update of the promise. So I will turn it over to Charlotte at this time.
Good evening and welcome to the Forsyth Promise Be the Change event. My name is Charlotte Lindell and I am the Partnership Director for the Forsyth Promise, a movement spearheaded in 2014 to ensure every child in Forsyth County receives a high quality education and is fully equipped to thrive throughout life. We believe to achieve this vision requires an unwavering commitment to educational equity, which is why we support the success of every child from cradle to career through the coordination, development, and alignment of community resources and supports. Whatever brought you here this evening, be it interest in learning more about the state of education in Forsyth County, or you're interested in getting involved in the Forsyth Promise movement, we're glad to have you. I thank you personally for showing up because that's exactly what each of our young people need in our community. More caring, committed adults showing up to move forward together on behalf of our children. Our community entered 2021 facing dual crises with COVID-19 and educational equity. The truth is, we didn't arrive at this current state within the past year. The pandemic only exacerbated the already existing inequities, negatively impacting the educational continuum, cradle to career, causing major disparities in outcomes, specifically along racial, ethnic, and socioeconomic lines. 2020 was a dynamic year in which racial bias, systemic discrimination, and aggression toward people of color was more visible and widely discussed than ever. I believe that given that backdrop of these events, it is critical to continue to use our community's data to clearly understand and communicate the facts around racial, ethnic, and other disparities, allowing us to begin having hard but needed conversations that will allow us to initiate the long overdue healing process for people of color. To keep the promise to our children in 2021, the Forsyth Promise will share decision-making power with those most impacted while centering racial equity and justice to accelerate educational equity. Our role will continue to be a system steward dedicated to supporting a community-wide agenda for change that leads to educational equity. We will serve as a convener, bringing together a range of cross-sector stakeholders to identify and implement strategies. We will advocate for resources and policy changes to support implementation. And our priorities will continue to focus on birth to third grade with an emphasis placed on third grade reading and kindergarten readiness. We will help us make good on our promise to children by continuing to center the voice of students and families. As you listen to our report today, you will see that we have a hard lift, hard work before us. And it will take all of us working together to change these outcomes for our children. It's up to us to keep the promise. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlotte. That was a great way to kick us off and to get us started. We'll now have Adam Hill, Executive Director of Forsyth Futures, give us a little snapshot of the community report and tell us a little bit about how we can use that to inform our work. Adam.
Good evening, everyone. Glad to be here with you all. As Mona said, I'm Adam Hill with Forsyth Futures. We have been working with Forsyth Promise over the past 8 years, providing data and research supports for the initiative's efforts. And one of the things that we support the Forsyth Promise around is to put together an annual report. So you can go ahead and jump to the next slide. And just to provide some background and context for this report, really the goal with the annual report is that to share information with the community in an accessible and engaging way, so that everyone across the community can better understand our education outcomes and really be encouraged to get involved and take action. So this year we changed a few things. One thing we did differently was that in the fall, we engaged an advisory group that was comprised of service providers, teachers, even students as well, to get feedback on how we put together the annual report in past years and how we could improve that process. So with that advisory group, they provided feedback that there was a need to provide more information around context. So what are all the community factors that have an impact on education outcomes, as well as weaving into the data that we provide in the annual report, stories from families who have lived experience of being in the education system and going through the education system. And then the last thing we did differently this year was the report is a digital format. So that allowed us to include more content and more information. And it really also allows us to adapt the information over time as it's updated. So this can serve as really an informational hub and a living document moving forward. So just wanted to highlight the content that we have included in the report. So this is when you visit the site, this is what you will see if you click the navigation menu. As I said, we added some community context. So this includes information about information such as financial stability, housing stability, physical and mental health. So information across these different areas that we all know has a huge impact on education outcomes. So we thought it was important to provide some context of what families and youth were experiencing in our community to help better understand education outcomes. So on top of that, we provided outcomes around our core education measures. So these span from cradle to career. And we include data around kindergarten readiness, third grade reading, 8th grade math, high school graduation, and college enrollment and completion. So these are measures that are established by Strive Together, which is the national network that we are part of. And we track them over time, and we also make sure that we are disaggregating the information by race, ethnicity, and economic status. So we can see how all of our students are doing across the community. This year, we also incorporated a section on equity measures. So this looks at things such as disproportionate discipline, teacher experience across the different schools in our school system. And really this is to provide an equity lens to the data that we're presenting. As Charlotte mentioned, COVID has had a huge impact on education. So we wanted to make sure we included some information about how COVID has impacted the education system over the last year. As I mentioned, we've started incorporating stories from people and families across the community so that we could bring the information to life and really connect it back to families, children, and youth. And then the last section we have in the report is highlighting some of the action that's being taken across the community. So that is what's included in the report. We hope you have taken a look at it. And if you haven't yet, go check it out. And really, we hope that this will serve as a resource that people can keep going back to as they have different questions or want to learn more about education outcomes and the actions we're taking as a community. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam. I think that's a great overview to share with everyone. And I hope that everyone will take a moment to take a look at that report and use it in your day-to-day work. So we're very excited about what has happened thus far, but we are just over the moon with our speakers tonight. And I'm just going to say their names for now. I'll introduce each one right before they speak, but we have Cindy Gordnier, Tricia McManus, Dr. Effie McMillan, and Chanel Thompson. So very excited to have them, and I believe they will be presenting in that order. So Cindy Gordnier is up first. She's the president and CEO of the United Way of Forsyth County. Her topic tonight is the impact of COVID-19, and her data point focus is online engagement. And she's going to be sharing some information with us regarding the community efforts around remote learning, which is a tremendous lift for a lot of folks in the community as COVID-19 struck. So at this time, we're going to turn this over to Cindy to share her comments. She will speak for about 5 to 7 minutes, and then we'll move into our first breakout session. And everyone is assigned a place to go for that. So Cindy, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mona. It's really nice to be here with everyone tonight. The Promise is doing such amazing work, and it's an honor to be included with the esteemed women on this panel. So, one of the things that you've heard a number of times already is all the factors that impact children in their quest to be successful in their education process, and that many of them are not in the classroom, but beyond the classroom. Children only spend about 15% of their time in the classroom. And they don't just appear in the morning and then disappear in the evening, and all of the other time really has no impact on their ability to be successful. There are so many factors, and you'll see some of them I've listed here in the slide. That there is the economic status of the family is a significant impact. The access to quality early childhood education, physical and mental health, violence in the family unit, presence or absence of enriching activities outside of school, parental expectations about education, and many others. So if we're going to talk about education, we have to consider all these other influences, not just the school district and the time children spend in school. So a pandemic that keeps kids out of the school environment has an even more outsized effect than we may have thought originally. So in 2020, we are all aware that life changed dramatically. And so I'm setting the stage a little bit for my fellow panelists that are going to talk about other aspects of education. But I'm going to focus a bit on how COVID has had an impact on everything, and those things that are beyond the classroom, and how important the impact of COVID is going to be on the long-term effect of education in our community and on children being successful in school. And I will also mention a little bit about the remote learning sites that Mona has talked about. So as I mentioned, all of those outside the classroom effects were magnified in 2020, early 2021 due to COVID. We cannot overstate the impact of a pandemic. It caused a complete disruption of systems. And those systems are the systems that allow children to be successful, to move forward in their education, things that, the disruption of economic systems, education systems, employment, housing, social services, and many others. The impact was not evenly distributed, African American and Latinx populations were very disproportionately affected negatively. And so that is going to cause increased disparities in our community. In March of 2020, United Way started working with 211. We fund 211 in our community, and it is a reference system. You call 211, they can give you referrals and information about any kind of social services needs you might have in your life. And because we were sending people to the 211 system early in the pandemic, we were able to get a great deal of data out of it very quickly. And one of the things we learned at the time was that many of our children in our school system live in hotels and motels with their parents or the adults in their lives. Because they can't afford a hotel, can't afford an apartment, they are paying week to week. And we were getting a lot of calls. It was the #1 call coming in about the fact that people were going to be evicted within 7 days. And every time there is a change in housing status, that means a child probably has to move to a new school. And that disrupts all of their education at that point and causes them to fall somewhat backwards. So because our pre-pandemic data already highlighted significant disparities in education achievement, and there was a heavier impact on the children who were already at a disadvantage, this is all included in the Forsyth Promise Community Education Report, the 2020 report that you've already heard a little bit about. If you haven't looked through it, please do. It has a great deal of very good information. If you care about education in our community, you want to make sure that you've looked at all aspects of it through the report. Adam Hill was on a minute ago, and he talked a little bit about how Forsyth Futures works with the Forsyth Promise. But I'm going to reference a few other things that Forsyth Futures has on their as part of the work that they do, and it was some of the impacts of COVID on our community. And so they estimated that 59% of children in our community would experience poverty if the workers in their household lost at-risk jobs, and that 50% of the adults in our community worked in at-risk jobs. So a significant number of our students were suddenly put in peril with the income within their family. 10% of all students in our school district and 20% of the Hispanic Latino students live in a household where all adults have some trouble speaking English, which is going to cause a disruption and difficulty if they are becoming the primary teacher to their children during a remote learning. And 8% of our children live in a household where no adult has a high school diploma. These are all impacting the education that children were now relying on when they had to go to remote learning. And that is going to cause long-term effects on where children are and how successful they can be in school. We also know at the time that education became a much lower priority for many families because they were concerned about survival. The calls that were coming in were around things that were basic needs, and they needed to be focused on. So we had disrupting factors like income, sudden loss of income, access to technology and internet, structure and support provided by the school environment. All of those things were disrupted for children. Health and having a COVID diagnosis within the household, and the loss of the connection, safety, and security that the school environment provides for many students in our school district. So if you go to the lasting effects on education, we're going to see housing instability, which means children are going to be more mobile and they're going to have more difficulty staying in one school and being able to be consistent in their learning. The economic instability for the families who could least absorb an income loss were the most likely to have one. And because economic status is a big indicator and predictor of school success, that's going to cause difficulties for us long term. Education attainment became disrupted. School is like a staircase, and one step leads to the next. If you remove a step which, losing a year of being in school, the school environment, is going to create difficulty in children being able to progress through the K through 12 experience successfully. We assume that the dropout rate will increase due to a variety of factors, that students have become disconnected, that some went to work to help support their families. And we would expect to see a higher dropout rate than we have been experiencing in the last few years. And that will have a negative impact on the individual's earning potential and the future workforce of our community. Mental health is at an all-time high, challenges with mental health, and children are seeing those effects as well. And they're going to come back to school, into the school environment with those challenges. And that's going to be something that is going to be a challenge for us as a community. And at the end of the day, those increased disparities are going to lead to increased inequity in our community. We know equity is important, and you've heard a little bit about that already today. It's important that we work towards being a more equitable community. COVID has set us backwards in being able to do that by increasing disparities throughout our community. So there is going to be a long-term and lasting effect because of the pandemic on many of the other things in our community which determine educational success for many children. Thank you.
Thank you, Cindy. That was a lot of wonderful information, and I was busy writing down lots of notes and that kind of thing. So we are now going to move into our first breakout session. We have facilitators assigned. We have questions. I think the first question will be sent, first and second question will be sent to the facilitator in the breakout room. And I believe that each breakout room will have a set amount of time. And then once that number goes to 0, it's time to come back to the full group. So you'll see the questions there. With regard to this presentation, what is your initial reaction to what you've heard? And what are some takeaways and or next steps to consider with regard to this topic? So at this time, I believe that we will be assigned to our breakout rooms with our assigned amount of time. So, and you may turn on your camera and mic in your breakout session. Thank you. All right, did we have everyone back from our breakout rooms? Hope there was a lot of great discussion. So we're very excited to present our next speaker, Tricia McManus, our new superintendent. We can use the new for a while, I guess, of schools here in Forsyth County. And she's been very visible throughout the community. So hopefully everyone has had a chance, if not to meet her, to at least see her. But if not, you'll get a wonderful introduction tonight into many of the insights and challenges that she's facing, but has a real can-do, we can get it done spirit. So very excited to have her. And she is going to talk about the core education measures, and some data point focus will be on third grade reading. So I will now turn it over to Tricia.
Thank you. And I'm going to share my screen really quickly. Okay, I think we're there. Let's see. All right. Mona, is that good? Can you see it? Just checking.
Yes, that is
Okay.
good.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. And I appreciate being part of the group tonight and the conversation. And thank you to Forsyth Promise for bringing us all together and for compiling such valuable information in this report. And so I'm going to focus tonight on the area of literacy, and specifically focused on third grade literacy. So I first wanted to say that, you know, our strategic plan has 5 goals, and a little bit later you're going to hear about one of our an effort around our equity goal, which is goal 2. And equity also goes across all of our goal areas. But our first goal of our strategic plan is that we will raise student achievement, close achievement gaps, and enable all students to take ownership of their learning. And so I thought this core measure I was going to be talking about tonight around literacy is completely related to goal 1 of our strategic plan. So we actually have 4 priorities. And you can see that one of our main priorities is that all students will be reading on grade level by 3rd grade. Why is this a priority? I know the entire community knows this is a priority and is working together to reach this. And that is just because there's so much research that shows the correlation between 3rd grade reading and later success, both in middle school, high school, and graduating from high school, and just future success in general. And so we are very committed to this goal. And if you look, and some of this might be getting cut off, I'm not sure, I hope not. But if you look, we've been talking about achievement gaps. And I know this goes to the 2018-19 school year. Last year, we did not have the 3rd grade state assessment at the end of the school year. And so this data is based on that. But if you see this data, I just wanted to paint the picture that what folks are saying about the achievement gap is real. Right now in 3rd grade, the total is 51.7% of 3rd graders reading on level. And again, that was from 2018-19. We don't have the assessment from last year. We will this year. And if you look at the demographic breakdown, you can see that white students are scoring on this assessment at 73.9. And then you can see Black at 36.5 and Hispanic at 34.8. So there is definitely truth in the fact that there are achievement gaps, and they've been historical, and we are ready to change that and to work with all of our partners. And so really at the end of this school year, even with the pandemic, we feel that with all of our support of community, with our learning centers, with all of our tutorials we've been doing, with all of, we have every school right now has extended learning plans in place where it includes after school tutorial, before school tutorial, Saturday academies. We've been implementing a new curriculum. We know some of the year was virtual, but we have been implementing a new curriculum, which I'm going to talk about in just a second. But so we've been doing things to where we still believe we can improve overall percentage of students reading on grade level. So our strategic plan goal for this year, even amidst a challenging year, is to move up to 55%. Our 3 to 5 year goal is 90%. And again, I know Mona said I have a can-do spirit. I do, because I know we can do it, and I've seen great advancements happen in literacy and in closing gaps when the system works together in a very strategic way around research-based practices that actually get results. And so with that said, I wanted to spend the last amount of time talking about some of what we are doing. And so one of the things that we've spent a lot of time on this year, and thank you so much to Project Impact because they funded this, but that is a guaranteed and viable literacy curriculum. It had been 10 years since the district had adopted a new curriculum. And as you know, in order for students to advance in literacy, they need to be exposed and they need to be able to master on grade level standards. And to do that, you need to be able to have a guaranteed and viable literacy curriculum. And there is actually one of the strongest measures of student achievement when you look at research is really around the resources they have in their hand, the resources the teachers have in their hand, and it really is a strong curriculum. This statement in blue comes right out of Ed Reports, and it says for education to be truly excellent and equitable, high quality curriculum and instructional materials must be available and implemented for all students. We are not going to close gaps without that. And so this school year, we rolled out a new curriculum. It was a little bit challenging during some of the remote, when we were in Plan C, and even now when you have some concurrent instruction, a lot of our younger students, and again, this is about third grade literacy, a lot of our third graders are back in classrooms. There are still some that are learning remotely, but we rolled out a new curriculum at the same time. And I will tell you, it has been challenging because we also rolled out a new learning platform, Canvas. A lot of change happened this school year, while folks were also, challenged with all of the safety aspects of COVID, all the mental health aspects that go along with the stress of COVID. And so basically, but this is something that's going to pay big dividends very soon. And that is that we did get a curriculum that is highly rated and that is going to meet the needs of our kids greatly as we get back into the regular routine. We have a new literacy framework, and we actually increased our time for literacy. And so that is a plus where we spend 150 minutes in our literacy block. And this new literacy framework actually provides a direction and a map for what literacy should look like in all of our classrooms. In addition, intensive training in science of reading, and that includes coaching and fidelity checks, which will be more and more even next school year when we have even more adults being able to be in our buildings. But really that intensive training in the science of reading, there is a science to teaching reading, and it has to happen across the board. There were years that I don't think that was a focus, and that's across the country. And I think we lost some time, and the gap started widening in literacy. And so basically having well-trained teachers in every single classroom, especially in those early learning grades, pre-K, K, 1, 2, and 3, having strong teachers that really understand the science of reading, and not that they just understand it, but that they're implementing it daily. And so that's a huge part of our improvement efforts. Also making sure the key instructional shifts happen in our classrooms based on the science of reading. So we are back to implementing phonological awareness, phonics and fluency instruction, and being explicit with that instruction. That's important. Also strengthening partnerships to advance K readiness and grade 3 reading outcomes. And so we have lots of partners out there, and thank you to all of you that are involved in our pre-K programming and pre-K expansion, and all of that early focus on early learning and having high quality pre-K. That's going to only strengthen what happens in grade 3 reading. This strong summer programming will be happening this year with a 1-to-10 ratio during the literacy block, and that is for students who have been struggling and also students that just need a boost. And our focus this summer is really on accelerating learners. You do not remediate students into becoming on-level readers. You have to continue to accelerate them. And then honestly, the use of assessments to differentiate instruction for students. So this is a huge focus of our work in the district right now. And Nicolette Grant, our CAO, and her entire team have done amazing work. We've got a lot more work to do. The curriculum is new, and so we've got to make sure that that it is being implemented with fidelity every single day. That we are executing very effectively all that we learn in the science about the science of reading. And so I will tell you, we strongly believe that we can get to that 90% and that we can close gaps between our Black students, Hispanic students, and white students. We have no doubt, and we are on the path thanks to all of our partners to getting there. Thank you.
That was a lot of wonderful information. Thank you so much. I'm sure many people heard something that they hadn't heard before and are prepared for the direction of the of your office and the wonderful staff that have been working on this. So I should have said this earlier, but our breakout questions are the same after each presenter. So we will now go into our next breakout session and again, continue that lively conversation with our questions. With regard to this presentation, what is your initial reaction to what you've heard and what are some takeaways or next steps to consider with regard to this topic? So the breakout sessions will now commence. Wonderful. It looks like we have most people back. So great. Looks like everybody came back. So we're going to continue with our presentation and another dynamic speaker, Dr. Effie McMillan. She's our Executive Director of Equity, Access, and Acceleration. And she is going to, of course, take on the topic of equity measures. Equity is one of the pillars of course, the Forsyth Promise, and of course should be interspersed in everything that we are doing. So I know that she's going to have some wonderful information, and the data point focus of her talk is the disproportionate discipline. So I will turn it over to you. I hear we had to change the slides to add doctor. So congratulations on that achievement. So
Thank you. I tell you, word travels fast, but thank you so much. Good evening, everyone. I'm excited to be here with you this evening. And I really want to thank Forsyth Promise for having not only hosting this event, but giving us an opportunity to participate and share the exciting things that we are doing in Winston-Salem, Forsyth County to address many of the inequities that have already been spoken about earlier in this evening. And so where I want to begin is just when I started back October 2019, probably a few months after that, we started engaging in a strategic plan process, which really engaged the voices, multiple voices from within our district, but also from our community partners, families, and even students. And based on what feedback we received and the voices that were heard, the school board voted on a very bold strategic plan. I think it's a very bold strategic plan. And I think the plan that we have put together and reaching these outcomes could definitely be a model for the state, if not for the nation. And so while equity is embedded throughout each of the 5 goals in our strategic plan, goal 2 puts intentional focus on equity and access, particularly for our Black and Brown students in the district. And so what I'm bringing to you tonight, specific to goal 2, is one of our objectives where we're focusing on reducing discipline disproportionality. And so as a part of that work, a steering committee came together of about 5 of us at the district level to start delving deep into what our discipline data was saying. And so what you see up here is really a 2-year trend. We went a little bit further back, but the data still mirrors what we saw even in previous years. So what you see here, I just only brought this one data point to you, but I think it paints a strong picture of where we are currently, why this work is so necessary. And then I want to share a little bit about what we have started to do to address it and what our next steps or plans for the future to reduce disproportionality in terms of discipline in the district. And so what you see here on the screen, it really highlights the risk ratio at which students are suspended in comparison to other student groups. So if you notice where the bold red is, shows Black and African American students. So in 17-18, you can see that Black or African American students were 3 times more likely to be suspended in comparison to all other student groups. That was pretty much the same in 18-19. But then what you also see in 17-18 is that Black and African American children were 5 times more likely to be suspended than white students. And then in the 18-19 year, it was just slightly lower, but it was at 4.68 times more likely to be suspended than white students. You also see the other student groups listed here, with Hispanics being closer to 1 in comparison to other student groups. But even with the data that you see here on the screen, where you see the largest risk ratio for out of school suspension is with our Black and African American students. And going back to Ms. McManus's point around literacy, even though she was talking specifically about third grade, if students are not in school, that's also impeding academic success. And so what we really want to do is change this, reverse this course that we're on right now, and work to reduce discipline outcomes for students, particularly the disproportionality that we see within the district. So Tasha, if you can go to the next slide, thank you. So here are a few of the things that we are doing to really start delving into this work. As I mentioned earlier, there was a steering committee of about 5 or 6 of us at the district level, including myself, Dr. Pratt, who's our deputy superintendent, our chief of program officer for student services, Deborah Harris, area superintendent, Donna Cannon, and our executive director for school improvement, Nathan Craver, which is also our data guru, who has been able to help us to really disaggregate the data that we have. So with that steering committee, it's how we started delving into our data so that we would really have a clear picture of where our starting point is, and to develop a timeline for reviewing and revising policies. Also for revising and implementing a new code of conduct, code of student conduct and character. So here are some of the things we've done out of that steering committee. Outside of that, we have started some anti-racist leadership professional development. We have 2 cohorts that are engaging right now. One cohort is primarily made up of senior team leadership, and a second cohort is made up of school principals that are really passionate about advancing equity, particularly delving into racial equity and improving outcomes along those racial lines where we're seeing such disproportionate outcomes. And we will have a third cohort that will be starting in a couple of weeks that will be a mix of principals and senior level leadership. And so we're not stopping there, even though that's where our starting point is with anti-racist leadership. We've also done some other things as the larger group of leaders across the district. From the steering committee, we have identified about 14 people to be the discipline code team, which will really help to guide our process in the district to, again, review our current discipline policies that we have, review our practices, our processes when students are referred, how we are responding to student behaviors in schools, and looking at implementing a more restorative approach to address this issue that we have. And so the long-term plan really is to do a complete overhaul by revising our district code of conduct to make sure that we can meet the needs of our students, teachers, and community. And we're going to do that through 4 phases. We've already really started phase 1, even though it says June 2021 here. But this is where we're doing the code assessment. So we've started with that deep data dive, but our continued work is delving deeper into practices that are happening in our school, from the time there's an incident in a classroom, there's a referral, all the way through whatever the consequence that is given to students. And here we're really trying to focus a lot on out of school suspension, reducing that, and in turn being able to reduce the likelihood that kids would be referred to the office in the first place. So really having some structures and practices in place that are restorative and proactive in building meaningful relationships with children, so that they can be successful and not only just be successful, but feel welcomed and feel like they really belong in any school that they attend in our district. The second part of the phase will be that recalibration of the code. So that really will be rewriting the code. And part of that rewriting of the code will engage multiple stakeholders from across the county. So not just people who work for Winston-Salem Forsyth County Schools, but really engaging with students, families, parents, and our community partners to hear from them what they would like to see in this code of conduct for us to really begin to shape something new and to change the outcomes that we currently see. After a code of conduct is created, a new code of conduct is created, our phase 3 will be about orienting district leaders, school leaders to the new code of conduct so that it works from the top level, buy-in from the top level, going to the principal level, school level, down to teachers, so that it can directly impact students in a positive way. So our goal is to actually launch the code, which is phase 4, August of 2022. So we have a lot of work ahead of us over the next year. It's going to be a lot of heavy lifting, a lot of engagement with stakeholders across the community for us to really work collaboratively to really address this issue and work towards a solution that will get us to reducing these discipline outcomes that we are currently seeing in our district.
Thank you.
That's all that I have for you this evening, but this is where we are at this point in time. So thanks so much.
Well, thank you. A lot of great information, looks like a lot of planning and progress on the way. So very excited. And we are going to, without further delay, go into our breakout sessions. And I'm not going to read the questions because we do have one more speaker and want everybody to be able to stay around for her as well. But thank you, Dr. McMillan, for that great information. Wonderful. It looks like we have everyone back, and we're very excited to present our final speaker for the evening, and that is Ms. Chanel M. Thompson. She's the Senior Program Officer of Local Impact in Forsyth County at Kate B. Reynolds Charitable Trust. Many of us know Chanel. We've worked with her, alongside her, and so lots of great information that we can expect in hearing how all of this is about and in the form of how it's shaping our community. So Chanel, will turn it over to you with the topic of community context review.
Thank you, Mona, and good evening, everyone. I want to thank you all for allowing me to be a part of this Be the Change virtual convening. And as we've discussed many of the data points tonight, I think the theme that continues to pervade is income should not impact an individual's health, economic mobility, and well-being. However, we know that in our community, residents who experience poverty often lack the wages necessary to be able to cover basic living expenses. These same residents may experience a phenomenon referred to as the public benefits cliff or cliff effect. And this essentially happens when individuals have an increase in wages that may result in a sudden loss of public benefits. These benefits are typically being used to help families absorb costs that that help them to absorb the most critical expenses that they have. Data shows that about 50% of Black and 62% of Hispanic Latino households live with families that are experiencing insufficient income, and this number is significantly higher than the 22% of white non-Hispanic residents in our community. Data further contends that the income inequality also impacts the student achievement gap. In order for all children to succeed, we must address the barriers that impede their success. Cash, if we can, well, stay on that slide. I think you may have gotten one slide ahead of me. So in order for us to address the barriers to economic mobility, it requires us to dive into the deep and complex topic that varies based on family size, income, and the various federal benefits. The most common benefits are food and nutrition programs, commonly referred to as food stamps or supplemental nutrition assistance programs, Women, Infants, and Children Program, or WIC, which provides nutrition, health support, and education for pregnant women, infants, and some children up to the age of 5, Medicaid for families with dependents, and Medicaid for infants and children, along with household vouchers. Each of these benefits have different federal poverty limits and asset limits, meaning that money that is able to be converted to cash within 5 days also may impact some benefits. Due to current policies, with the exception of housing vouchers, recipients can immediately lose their benefits and may create some financial crisis. Families become more at risk for homelessness, food insecurity, and financial stability, and these factors may influence the student's success. Now we're ready to go to the next slide, Tash. In Forsyth County, food and nutrition is the largest subsidy program with nearly 50,000 residents receiving support. Child care subsidy has the smallest number of recipients, but it is the largest subsidy per person. And our housing vouchers provide about a 1-year slope to prepare residents to adjust to a new housing or pay full rent for their current properties. For context, and we'll stay on this slide, Tash, a 50-cent increase in hourly wages is the equivalent of approximately $80 per month in net income. And for a single mother with 3 children who earns $16 an hour qualifies for food stamps. That raise after taxes is the equivalent of about $45 that can cause a loss of $228 per month in food and nutrition support. A family with 2 working adults earning $18 per hour each with 3 children could qualify for child care subsidies of about $1,464 a month. If one wage earner receives a 50-cent hourly wage increase, then they would exceed the 200% federal poverty guidelines and lose their subsidy. This $70 after taxes would actually end up costing a family $1,390 a month. The cliff effect has a domino effect and oftentimes causes families who are experiencing economic mobility, The cliff effect has a domino effect for families. Economic mobility slips from their grasp, requiring individuals to work multiple jobs to make ends meet. Our youngest residents are at most risk when the adults who care for them struggle financially. Cash, let's go to the next slide. And while this may seem like a never-ending cycle, our community is poised to address these issues head-on. In 2019, the Winston-Salem Foundation, Kate B. Reynolds Charitable Trust, United Way, CSIM, and the Asset Building Coalition convened a town hall meeting, and with more than 200 people in attendance, learning groups were created to center the voices of individuals with lived experience, and we laid out a blueprint to explore some solutions. Current conversations include understanding the policies that create the cliff, creating solutions that allow for smoother transitions rather than creating a slope rather than a cliff. And this may include things like making investments into advocacy campaigns and program implementations, supported employers to develop compensation packages that mitigate hourly wage increases, and ensuring that individuals living in Forsyth County are being paid a living wage. While it's complicated, it's essential. At KB Reynolds Charitable Trust, we work to build and sustain the success of rural and urban communities around the state and in Forsyth County. We continue to advance efforts of equality to improve the lives of babies and their mothers, young children, youth, young adults, elderly, people of color, and people with low incomes. And so we believe in making investments into impact, and we envision a thriving Forsyth County. And through investments in special initiatives like the Great Expectations, we make investments into the Forsyth Promise to ensure that every child in Forsyth County enters kindergarten ready to learn and leaves set for success. To learn more about the benefits cliff, I encourage you to visit the microsite. Tash should be dropping that link in the chat for you. This site provides concrete data and index to benefits, a benefit simulator, access to notes from community meetings, and additional context for this body of work as it ramps back up. I would like to extend my thanks to Forsyth Futures for the work that they have done, to the Department of Social Services, along with the interns who helped us to get to this place. And we do know that as we continue to do this work, that we will be able to solve this prevalent and prevailing issue in our community. Thanks for allowing me to share with you tonight.
Thank you, Chanel. That's a lot of great information. Some information dropped in the chat for people to be able to follow up and learn more. And we are going to move to our breakout session with the same questions. So again, lots of great things to discuss and share. And then we'll come back to do some wrap up. Great. So thank you everyone for your participation. We want to take a moment to thank our speakers and really appreciate your time and action. We had hoped to have a little bit of a concluding discussion, but we're a little bit over time. So we're going to go straight to our call to action. Our wonderful facilitators have taken notes, and we'll be sharing information as well as the slides on our Promise website, as well as sending some notes. So thank you so much. But our action commitments, all right, Tash, you're moving a little fast. I'm not talking that fast. Share the action commitments, share lived experience stories, submit articles for our newsletter, for the TFP newsletter, share community education report, read the community education report, interact with it, and then share it. Offer a community education report feedback. I'm sure Adam would appreciate that. Participate in community education report topic deep dive when those are offered, and engage in the work. And there are also going to be links to the action commitments. All right, Tash, now we can move forward. So some final thoughts and live evaluation. We have some polls, I believe, that we're going to put up for you to participate in. So if you would go on and add your information to the polls there. And it's a live evaluation. So hopefully everybody's had a chance to participate in those before. Everybody can participate. Okay. I think we're ready to wrap up this poll. Great. So we have 62% strongly agree the focus and content of this event met my interest. 38% agree. 62% strongly agree. And then for the next question, I felt encouraged and able to engage actively. It's very, very positive. 77% strongly agree and 23% agree. So we have some folks who are willing to work. So we want to make sure that we find opportunities and that you share opportunities with us, with the promise as well of how you're working on the things that we've discussed this evening. All right. Okay. And I believe we would like you to take a moment to answer. Do we have one more poll, Tash? So if not, we want to thank you for your participation. We know that this is a sacrifice to take this time of evening to be with us, but we want you to share the good work of the promise. We want you to be involved. We want you to take action. We want everyone to be a part of this because it's going to take all of us to make a difference. We can't just leave it to the school system. We can't just leave it to those who represent certain organizations. It is a community-wide effort to make sure that we are making good on our promise, that we are being the change that we want to see, and that we are connecting with our youth. And the Forsyth Promise is a cradle to career. I don't want to say initiative, but an opportunity to embed values and the support that's needed to help every student, every young person be successful, believe in every young person, support every young person so that we can have the community that we want to see, the community that we want to live in, the community that we want to raise our children in, and the community where every child can feel successful, experience success, and believe in the future. So again, thank you everyone. Thank you to the Forsyth Promise staff, Tash for working with all the speakers and everyone to pull this together. We appreciate all of you, and be on the lookout for more information, read that report, and we hope that we'll see you at the next Be the Change event. Thank you, everyone.